Because in all reality, it's very, very unlikely Reva would have found information in the archives that, even if the two were close friends during the Clone Wars, which again, we see nothing to suggest they were, it's unlikely she'd find anything that would...
Notice he's actually coding a lot of his languages. He's saying it's unlikely, it's unlikely, it's unlikely. But it's there, so obviously it happened, whether or not unlikely or not. It's there. The storyline kind of hinges on it's there, and being unlikely doesn't mean it's impossible.
This Organized Chaos video is brought to you by Gems Art Studio. This video is also brought to you by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello again. This time we're doing something different. I am going to be taking a request, which isn't different at all. I take requests fairly often. But the requests do help me out. But this time I'm taking a request from someone who's very critical of my channel. This is a request from Nady, who, looking over his records, is largely a critical drinker fan, but he pops up in my videos all the time. I'm not thrilled with a lot of his comments, but sometimes it's usually directed towards me, so I'm willing to let it fly. And I want to cover his request because it's good to cover people who are more critical of you. Always. It's always good to explore their thoughts as much as possible. He requested that I look at Thor Skywalker. And before I get too far into it, I'm going to go ahead and ask you guys, do a little call to action, which I don't usually do. I just usually put a little subscribe thing right here. I'm going to ask you to subscribe. I'm going to ask you to leave a like. Try to get my videos out to more people like me or a lot of my fans. You guys, like I say, I'm not really woke, but I'm definitely anti-woke, without a doubt. So we are going to be looking at Naty's request for Thor Skywalker. I don't know why I did an inflection on Nady there, by the way, but hey. Thor Skywalker was a YouTuber. I think I've seen a couple of his videos. I don't recall having a serious issue with him. What I suspect going into this video is that he's going to be nitpicking the show, which the show is very vulnerable to nitpicks. I think everything's vulnerable to nitpicks, but I think Obi-Wan has way more nitpicks than a lot of other Star Wars stuff, save maybe the prequels. There's lots of flimsy writing. One thing I brought up on the podcast, link in the description if you're looking up the podcast, is how I really like what they did with the character of Reva, but how they got her there was very convoluted and didn't make a whole lot of sense. It's like, I like what you're doing. I like how you're doing like a inverse Darth Vader, someone who follows a similar path, but in the end chooses to do the right thing. I like that. But then, like, how they get her there, it's like they didn't do it naturally. They just kind of forced her along, it felt like, and especially at the end. That being said, it's an interesting character. I do want to see what they do with her, but I wish they'd made that a bit more, just make it flow better. Make it less convoluted. Make it less weird. If you're wondering what I mean when I say it's convoluted, podcast description below. But let's go ahead and get to the request. We're going to be looking at Thor Skywalker today. What is the title of this one? This is How Obi-Wan Kenobi series insults your intelligence. I have a feeling this is going to be a super nitpicky one, but let's see.
Now, just a little warning before we begin, there will be major spoilers in this video for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, so if you haven't seen the whole thing yet, and you don't want anything ruined, it is a really good time to click away. Okay, so before getting into it, I'm going to once again very quickly say something that I know some of you out there get rather tired of me saying all the time, which is that you are absolutely free to love whatever you want. You are free to have loved every single minute of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, and to not care about or maybe agree with what I'll have to say about it here in this video. And though I'm honestly not here to steal your joy or anything like that, or to even change your mind, I'm simply a Star Wars fan who believes it should be held to a rather high standard, as well as being someone who likes to analyze stories.
I do feel like that might be a lot. Yes. I feel like there are people who are holding Star Wars to a higher standard, and they're getting clumped in with the people who are just racist right now. And that is discouraging. I don't know how to separate that because you get this racist group, a sexist group, that are just hating on everything Star Wars, and then you get people who are overly critical hating on Star Wars. And I want to try to separate those groups out. I don't know how, though, because it's like they've chosen their camp, and it's like, exercise the racist from your group. I don't know how else to say it. When Ben Shapiro defends the racist, call him out on it. When neurotic or critical drinker defend the racist, call them out on it. Exercise them from the group. Because if you're just overly critical of the series, you're allowed to be. I think nitpicking gets a bit excessive, and it's bad in critique to really do that too much. That being said, it's a whole nother level from being racist. Exercise the racist from your groups, guys. If you don't call them out, then you're just being capitulate with them.
Stories, and that, if I may be so bold, I think others enjoy when I do it as well. But I'm here to tell you there is some insulting levels of writing in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, which isn't to say there was nothing I enjoyed about it at all. But most of what I did enjoy was surface level or nostalgia-inducing fluff, and that when you look past that, what we're left with was a story that doesn't make sense and only exists to use characters like Obi-Wan Kenobi, Darth Vader, and Leia as the assets Disney views them as something which they know will make them a ton of money, and where the story they include them in is not anywhere near as important as the amount of Disney Plus subscriptions they can or will generate by using them. Basically, I make videos like these in the hopes others will demand better Star Wars from Disney too. And those,
I mean, so far I'm following along. I think I definitely feel like he's going to be overly critical, in my opinion. It's one of those things where it's like if you have lots of nitpicks about the Obi-Wan series, like, you know, some of the way things were shot, some of the ways things were written, it's not perfect. I feel like that script could be used once over. It's not bad script. I actually like what they do with a lot of the characters, but some there's points where it's a little bit clumsy. I feel like the direction could have been a little bit sharper. The last episode, direction-wise, was kind of perfect. That script still could have used once over. So yeah, if you have all these collections of issues with Obi-Wan from all these nitpicks, then yeah, I get it. Don't side with the racist. You're allowed to have critiques, as long as your critiques aren't shit like Reva's a diversity hire or something like that. If your critiques are actually, hey, this could be better directed, this could be better written, elaborate on that. Don't let yourself get clumped with the racist.
Though there are many issues we could discuss in regards to the series, and maybe I will in future videos, I think we have to start with that which is at the core of the whole story, which, no, isn't actually Obi-Wan Kenobi himself, but is instead Leia. She is the catalyst, or plot device, or reason why everything happens or will happen in the series.
I mean, you could make a lot of cases about how supporting characters help move the story along. They frequently do. Especially in, like, a superhero story, which, let's face it, I know Star Wars isn't technically a superhero story, but this is technically a superhero story about Obi-Wan Kenobi. Lots of times there'll be a villain that is, like, pushing the action forward and the hero responding. That is very common in these types of stories. Leia might be the catalyst. The hero himself doesn't necessarily have to be the catalyst for things happening. It's the hero's reaction to the things happening that is important, though.
And so with that being the case, I think there's no better place to start than at the beginning, and how almost everything around her kidnapping by Reva makes no sense whatsoever. And yes, I know some will quickly say, but wait, Thor, it does all get explained right in the series and makes perfect sense. Reva looked into the Imperial archives and found out that Obi-Wan Kenobi and Bail Organa were friends once upon a time. That's how she knew Bail would get in contact with Obi-Wan and send him after Leia when she was kidnapped. And though, sure, I guess Reva could have looked into the archives and found out that the two were associates during the Clone Wars, I don't know what she could have found in there that implies the two were truly close friends. I don't recall seeing anything in the Clone Wars animated series or...
Well, he might have seen the Clone Wars animated series. I haven't. I assume there's some sort of history there we haven't seen. I've just seen the movies. I assume not everything's been recorded. They are friends. It is true they are friends, so... yeah.
or in the prequels, that really establishes that. And sure, it could have happened off-screen, but the most we ever see between the two, between Bail and Obi-Wan, is their secret plan to hide Luke and Leia, which of course also includes Yoda. But those characters are the only ones who would have knowledge of that connection between them, between Bail and Obi-Wan in this case. Nevertheless, the writers very much use that information in a sort of meta way, or to essentially trick you into not realizing how flimsy Reva's plan actually is, that we're not separating our greater knowledge of the whole story from what Reva should know or be able to piece together, even if she looked into the archives and found they once worked together.
Okay, what he's specifying is actually kind of an issue. That's the thing, like, there could have been more off-screen. There could have been a battle they fought. There's lots of things that could happen off-screen. The fact is, there are friends, and it was recorded in the archive that they are friends. So it's not a huge leap that something happened that got recorded that they're friends. Yeah, I don't feel like that's a huge leap, just something we haven't seen.
Together and seemed close according to, what, some reports? Or
I mean, I feel like he's really stretching here.
Maybe some old Hollow videos?
And here's the thing that's going to be more important. There are legit critiques, especially of Reva's storyline. Very legit critiques. This is kind of a stretch. This is a minor at best. Something could have happened off screen as recorded in the archive. We don't have access to the archive, so we don't know what's recorded in there.
And you might want to say that I'm being very, very nitpicky right now, but you have to keep in mind this kidnapping is the catalyst for literally everything. It is the reason this story happens in the first place. And so if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, everything else around it will exist on a rather shaky foundation.
Well, there's also the suspension of disbelief. It gets thrown around, I think, excessively, but it is important. Why is it important? Because every story should be allowed one suspension of disbelief element. Now, Obi-Wan actually has more than that, and he hasn't gone to him. But this being the catalyst, that, number one, I don't even think that's a huge suspension of disbelief. I don't even know if this counts. The idea that there's a recording of that somehow Bail and Obi-Wan are friends doesn't seem like that huge of a leap to me. At all. Maybe there's things that happened before the Clone Wars. I don't know. And the fact is, it's not firmly established. How much of a backstory do you want them to give about Bail and Obi-Wan? Honestly, I won't mind like a little side story about them becoming friends. But the fact is, they have a long history. We know they have a long history. Something got recorded in the archives that they have a long history. Yeah.
Because in all reality, it's very, very unlikely Reva would have found information in the archives that, even if the two were close friends during the Clone Wars, which again, we see nothing to suggest they were, it's unlikely she'd find anything that would...
Notice he's actually coding a lot of his languages. He's saying it's unlikely, it's unlikely, it's unlikely. But it's there, so obviously it happened, whether or not unlikely or not. It's there. The storyline kind of hinges on it's there, and being unlikely doesn't mean it's impossible.
Convince her that the two would remain not only friends after the fact, after the Jedi had become enemies of the state, but that Bail would also not only know where Obi-Wan Kenobi is hiding and be able to contact him, but that he actually would contact him. Because even though you could argue, again, given what the audience knows, Bail's response does make sense to all of this, that he would keep the abduction a secret and perhaps would ask...
Thank you, because that does actually make sense. Now, I feel like the point he's trying to get to, he's taken a while to get to it, would be, why does she know? Because I think her finding the recording in some sort of old recording, finding some sort of history of them being friends is not a huge stretch. He keeps on saying it's unlikely. Yeah, it's unlikely. It's not impossible. And for all we know, maybe it's very likely. Maybe they did something very public together where they are friends. It just hasn't been recorded yet. There's histories between these characters we don't see. We don't see every waking moment. We don't see them on the shitter. There's lots of things we haven't seen with these characters yet. That is not a stretch, I think, at all. The stretch is, why would he go to Obi-Wan when he knows Obi-Wan is there to protect Luke and not just reach out to a bounty hunter? Now, the counter to that would be he trusts Obi-Wan more than a bounty hunter. Maybe. But does he not have somebody in his private guard that maybe he could trust for an undercover mission like this? I would think he would. With that being said, certainly Obi-Wan would be more effective than his private guard. So again, if these things bother you, then cool, but I feel like you're really stretching. These aren't even huge leaps.
Kenobi for help, not wanting anyone to potentially ask why someone would kidnap his adopted daughter, other than for the obvious reason that most logical people would come to, that being the kidnappers just want some credits and the abduction would have absolutely nothing to do with Leia herself. But anyway, I only say perhaps he'd go to Kenobi for help because with the abduction being intentionally kept a secret by Bail himself, which it is, remember Bail does say he doesn't want this to go public or to take it to the Senate because it might draw too much attention to Leia. But with it
I feel like he's falling victim to a lot of the nitpicking stuff I bring up a lot. If you go into a show looking for problems, you will find them. He's definitely approaching it, I feel, in a more honest way than most people I covered in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Part of the point of that series was to point out how bad people are really, like, going nuts. This, I believe, is more thoughtful, but he has the same issue. He's obviously not racist or sexist. He's just tackling this more in a honest way. But he's clearly looking for these problems where I don't feel it's a huge stretch that these things exist. He hasn't even gone to a lot of the serious stuff I brought up in the podcast.
Being kept a secret, never even reported to the Empire, what then happens if the Empire does find out during or after the fact about Leia's kidnapping and that a Jedi saved her, and that the Jedi who did this was Obi-Wan Kenobi, who, according to looking into the archives, it can be easily pieced together that the two, Bail and him, were really, really good friends. And sure, the Empire is shown to be pretty stupid most of the time, unfortunately, but even they'll figure out that if the information never went public, that the most likely reason why Obi-Wan Kenobi came out of hiding to save Leia was because Bail contacted him directly and asked for his help. I mean, how else would Obi-Wan have ever learned about the abduction short of some huge coincidence that he just so happened to hear about it or be in the right place at the right time?
So his argument is now that because Obi-Wan is kind of essentially flaunted the fact that he's Obi-Wan and saved Leia, he has essentially broadcast that Leia has been kidnapped. Has he, though? We know that Obi-Wan went in and did some chaos with the Empire. Would we expect the Empire... Like, obviously the Empire is going to know that Obi-Wan was out there flaunting his stuff. This also requires that the Empire report that they kidnapped Leia. Would they make that public? I'm not confident they would want to make that public, meaning they might also want to hide the fact that Obi-Wan was involved. Again, I don't think this is a huge leap. Like, he's proposing these questions and it's making me think, but then it leads me to the logical conclusion that actually fits within the story. Let's see where else he goes, because I was expecting more, like, serious criticisms. I have criticisms that are, honestly, in my opinion, more legit, of course. Personal preference, but yeah, it's one of those things. If you go in looking for problems, you'll see problems. And this, I don't even feel like is a huge problem.
Which the Empire wouldn't believe anyway. And thus, you could easily argue Bail is putting not only Leia, but himself and his entire planet in great danger by sending Kenobi after her instead of going to the Empire to report it, keeping in mind he has no clue that Reva, or in a sense the Empire, are the ones behind it. He's trying to keep suspicion away from Leia,
but he doesn't trust the Empire. Bail is one of the leading resistance figures against the Empire. Now, he doesn't make that public, but we know he dislikes the Empire. That's why, like, him and Leia Lair will be protesting the Empire in the Senate and things like that. It would make sense he won't go to the Empire because he doesn't want them to know that he has this weakness. That'd be a very bad call on his part.
By keeping the whole thing a secret and going to a Jedi, which is actually making the whole thing much riskier all around. even if you want to argue Kenobi is indeed his best chance to see her rescued, and what he'd do as a concerned, irrational thinking father. But that isn't even the real issue here. Instead, it's that Reva's banking on Bail not only knowing how to get in contact with Obi-Wan based on some archived information, but that he'll
Well, the archive's saying that they're friends, so it would make sense that they could probably get in contact with each other.
actually indeed go to him and ask for help despite the risk she has to know he'd be putting himself in.
Yeah, no, that's a dice roll, but yeah, odds are he would trust Obi-Wan more than he would trust a bounty hunter, and Obi-Wan would be more capable than one of his guards keeping it private. So there's a logic here. You don't like it, obviously, but I don't feel this is entirely a huge leap for Reva or Bail.
And even though she has no idea that there's anything special about Leia that would cause Bail to act so secretively, anything that he'd want to keep hidden about her that would prevent him.
Well, having his daughter kidnapped essentially on his land, you don't want to show that type of weakness. As a leader, that's not something you want to show unless it's absolutely necessary. You want to keep it off the books.
Him from just going to the Senate and or Empire to ask for help or put.
And we already established he would not trust the Empire. And why would he trust the Senate? Is he hoping to pass a bill to get her back?
Putting out a public call that he is willing to pay whatever he has to pay for the safe return of his daughter. Also, if Reva suspects there's a strong friendship between Bail and Obi-Wan, or has such profound evidence found in the archives that she'd hatch an entire plan that hinged on the two still being in contact, and Obi-Wan willing to come out of hiding to help, why not just go to Darth Vader with all of that information? I mean, her whole goal is to impress Vader and to get closer to him in order to kill him. She doesn't actually care about Kenobi as far as we know. So wouldn't giving Vader a potential key to finding Kenobi make more sense than some elaborate plan that, as far as she should think or know, wouldn't lure Kenobi out anyway, or only has a small chance of doing so? Again, she
does she actually have Vader's ear at this point in the series? She got Vader's ear by essentially going after Leia and drawing out Kenobi, and Kenobi got his interest. Does she have Vader's ear? Do we know that I got no evidence that she could get Vader's ear until Kenobi possibly popped up, and then Kenobi caught Vader's ear, which was the point of her plan. Reva has issues with this storyline, but he's not really hitting on him.
should have no idea Bail will keep everything a secret and go to Kenobi, especially when you consider how risky that is for all parties involved. But even though this is a pretty shaky start to the story, it's still one that I think a lot of people or fans can and will choose to simply overlook. But the other big issue around Leia...
Well, it's easy to overlook. You're bringing up, like, at best, you're bringing up things, and you're even specifying this thing is unlikely. Well, I think the most unlikely thing you've brought up is that Bail and Kenobi would have a record in the archive that they're friends, which maybe they do, and we don't know it. Outside of that, everything else actually seems kind of logical.
Yeah, or one of them, is one that is truly insulting to fans when you...
I mean, you could actually make the argument that Reva's plan is convoluted as fuck, and it is. It's crazy convoluted. But it works. I mean, I'm going to kidnap Leia to draw out Obi-Wan to get Vader's interest. I mean, it's probably not easy to get Vader's interest, so maybe you have to get a bit convoluted to get that.
You really stop and play the whole thing out from beginning to end. And what I'm of course talking about is the very impersonal message she sends to Obi-Wan in A New Hope, the one...
Well, also at the end of this series, it's kind of established that they want to keep the fact that Leia and Obi-Wan know each other kind of on the down low, on the QT there. So they do an impersonal message sent. That's what they explain at the end of the series, kind of to help cover up this fact. It's one of those things, whenever you add stuff to the canon, it's tough not to fudge around with it a little bit. And I actually do think the series does a good job kind of working around the canon. It can't be perfect, because it's not how life is. But I think it does a good job working around the canon, largely.
One that implies they have never met, even though they become besties in the series. And I know, some will say, but Thor, that too gets explained right in the series and makes perfect sense now. She sent a very formal and impersonal message because Obi-Wan specifically told her they...
And it's also worth noting, in that message, Leia specifies how Bail and Obi-Wan were friends, so there probably is some sort of record that they're friends, because she's willing to publicly announce that they're friends.
They needed to hide the fact that they know each other, that it could endanger both of them. And sure, in Leia's day-to-day life from that point on, especially as a future senator, she should probably refrain from bringing up Obi-Wan Kenobi ever again. She should never even allude to the fact that she met him, much less that he rescued her once upon a time.
Or that she was even kidnapped.
Or twice upon a time. But here's the thing, when Leia records that very iconic message for Obi-Wan Kenobi, her ship has just come from a battle over the planet Scarif, one where plans for the Empire's secret weapon, the Death Star, have been stolen and passed by hand to someone on her ship, which Darth Vader literally witnesses. She then sends those very plans, along with a visual recording of herself saying that her father has sent her to find Obi-Wan Kenobi in order to get those plans back to her father on Alderaan. In other words, not only is the jig up before ever recording that message in the first place, not only does she know there'll be no escape for the princess this time, or no amount of excuses that get her out of this mess, but if the Empire gets their hands on that message she sent, it will not even remotely matter if it's just a formal request that doesn't specifically give away that she and Obi-Wan know each other, because, for one, that formal request is to a Jedi asking for help to commit treason against the Empire by aiding the rebellion in their attempt to destroy the Death Star. All of that already.
Okay, so, number one, the Obi-Wan Kenobi series has to work with what's already established. They can't go back and rewrite A New Hope. Number two, she spent, approximately 10 years at that point, essentially pretending like she doesn't know Obi-Wan. So it almost might be like her default setting when she talks to him to act like she doesn't know him in a message. Just like when she's sending a message, when she's recording a message, I don't know Obi-Wan is in the back of her mind, so she's just going to act like that. Also, if it's intercepted and the plans are there, this is A New Hope stuff. Obi-Wan Kenobi can't rewrite the movie.
Message or no message likely gets her executed, and in fact it does, because the Empire decides to execute her regardless of ever seeing that message and or getting that evidence, because they didn't even...
Yeah, no, she wasn't protecting herself. The jig was up on her. She was protecting... she's just trying to get the information out. And she's sending a message to Obi-Wan.
Need to know she sent a message to Obi-Wan Kenobi to know she is a rebel and a traitor at that point. For two, and this is the truly egregious part of all of this that so many seem to be overlooking, but the Empire already knows Leia knows Obi-Wan Kenobi. He literally rescued her not once, but twice 9 years prior to all of this happening in A New Hope, and one of those times was from a secret Imperial base where he, Obi-Wan, tried to sneak her out under a trench coat. Not to mention, the whole thing was literally a plan.
Yes, the Empire might know this, but is the Empire going to publicize that they were trying to kidnap the Princess of Alderaan? Maybe 20 years later, maybe 10 years later, they don't care after Alderaan's been destroyed. But Alderaan is still a major political player. They probably don't want to publicize their kidnapping the Princess of Alderaan. Them knowing that Leia and Obi-Wan know each other, not a big deal. And as I said, she might just be like on autopilot recording a message, pretending like she doesn't know Obi-Wan. They have to work with what they're given in A New Hope. That's not really the fault of the writing of Obi-Wan Kenobi, which has its issues. This is really kind of flimsy. I was honestly expecting better.
Plan hatched by a Inquisitor to use Leia to get to Kenobi, and not only does that plan work, but Vader is fully aware of that plan because he even twists it to suit his own needs. In other words, what exactly does Obi-Wan telling Leia not to tell anyone that they know each other actually accomplish? Who does he think she should hide it from, considering the Empire already knows? And who exactly does Leia think she's trying to fool when she records that message and doesn't...
Well, the thing to understand, okay, so after Alderaan is destroyed, yeah, the Empire will go out and do whatever the fuck. During this time period, 10 years ago, when the rebellion is building up, there are still major political forces like Alderaan who are in conflict with the Empire, not directly, but kind of, not agreeing. That will hold them back. They are not going to want to do anything out in the open. They might do things on the down low, on the QT, all that undercover stuff. But they're not going to do things out in the open.
And get personal with Obi-Wan, even though that is the perfect time to plead to his better nature, to plead to the man she knows, and to ask for help.
Except she has no reason to believe he wouldn't help. Why does she need to get down on her hands and knees and beg for help? Of course he's going to help when he gets this message, which he does.
But the biggest question of all here is, who exactly did the writers think they were fooling when Obi-Wan says that line to Leia in the final episode? Did they think no one would realize that the Empire would already know there's a connection between the...
Yes, the Empire... You've already said this. This is the fun of reacting to videos. It's not like he can hear me. But yes, the Empire knows that. But do they want to make it public? Do they want it? Because if they make it public, they make it public that they kidnapped the Princess of Alderaan. And that's not going to look good. That's going to be very bad face for them. They want to be in the place of being able to deny this as much as possible.
The two, and that, in all reality, keeping it a secret from the Empire is pretty much irrelevant. I mean, when Leia is confronted by Darth Vader at the beginning of
There's more forces than the Empire. Yes, the Empire is building up. They're getting powerful. They're probably the most powerful force at this point in the series. But there are other forces they have to be concerned about.
New Hope, and she claims she's not a member of the rebellion, Vader could basically say to her, hey, do you remember that time Obi-Wan broke into Fortress Inquisitorius and rescued you? Don't suppose that means you and or your father might know what he's up to these days, or that you're going to him right now, but could only send a message along with the plan?
They aren't going to rewrite A New Hope. And I'm not even sure what bringing up past history really means. Maybe he did off camera. We don't know. It seems like a weird segue. Remember that time 10 years ago when Obi-Wan saved you? Of course you know. That's a weird thing to bring up. Number one, they would both know that. So why would he bring that up specifically?
Plans that you want the rebellion to use to blow up the Death Star? And well, I sure hope that if you did try to send him a message, you were very informal and impersonal, otherwise bad things will happen to both of you. But wait, it does get even better, because that line from Obi-Wan to Leia about keeping it a secret is not the only weak attempt to explain why Vader kind of forgets about Leia and Obi-Wan's connection. We also had Palpatine.
Where is it evidence that he forgets? Where is that evidenced?
Telling Vader that he should stop hunting Kenobi because it's making him weak, even though the series established one of Anakin or Vader's biggest problems was not being able to let go of things and being too focused. I guess those few words from Palpatine finally fixed that problem.
Well, Palpatine is the boss, and we've seen how quickly he bows to Palpatine. Yeah. I mean, here's the deal. You guys complain when there's going to be lots of fights between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Vader between these two. But you're also going to complain if he gives up. Pick a lane.
Even though he shows the same relentlessness years later when hunting Luke.
Yes, because that's the type of character he is. Palpatine's kind of able to jar him off it, but then he gets back engaged. Yeah.
Basically here, like I said at the beginning, you can enjoy the series if you want. That is absolutely fine by me. Something doesn't have to be perfect or even good to be liked and enjoyed or even loved. But virtually nothing in the story holds up when closely scrutinized. And the story itself feels meta and literally tries to tell you at points why you should just
We'll get to it, but I have a lot to say at the end.
Overlook the plot holes it's creating. Characters are literally telling you why the story works, even though it doesn't. Which then also means the story is kind of self-aware. It knows it's creating plot holes. The writers are aware of these inconsistencies they're creating, but they either don't care to or don't know how to create a story free of them. But then again,
I believe he's misusing the term plot hole. Plot hole is literally something where you set up a logical inconsistency in the story that it cannot escape from. That just destroys the entire story, which none of that has been done in anything he's explained here. I don't believe there's any plot holes in this series per se. There's some clunky writing. There's some clunky direction. Plot holes seems like kind of a stretch.
It's not their job to tell a great Star Wars story. Instead, it's their job to get people to watch it, and mission accomplished in this.
True? These people complain about, hey, Disney's trying to get people to watch Star Wars stories. And it's like, yeah, they spent $4 billion on it, of course. They're not trying to make Star Wars stories to get people not to watch. George Lucas wanted people to watch Star Wars stories when he made it. He didn't make it be like, I hope nobody watches this. I'm going to bury this. No, he made it and released it.
This case. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about any and all of this. Do these plot holes bother you? Did you notice them? Or do you just not care and want to enjoy the series?
Wow. Okay. That was fairly flimsy. Not gonna lie, I was expecting better critique from him. Yeah, okay, so I talked about it on the podcast. I'm probably going to go into more detail in that, so check out in the link description again. But one of the biggest issues here is not so much like at the beginning. I do feel like the stuff happened at the beginning was pretty well explained. But one thing that happens is Bail sends Obi-Wan a message saying, hey, I haven't heard from you. I hope it's been a while since I've seen the series, but the message is essentially, It's been a while since I've heard from you. I hope everything with Leia is okay. I'm going to make certain to send guards to help Owen and Luke. And then Reva gets that message, but she doesn't get the full thing. She gets like Farm, Tatooine, Owen, and Boy, or something like that. So she decides to go there and get Luke. Now, why does she decide to do this is actually not clear. This is after Vader kicks the crap out of her. And then she decides to go after Luke. Why? That's something I have an issue with. Because her whole goal with going after Leia was to drive out Obi-Wan Kenobi. Hey, it works. Good job. You get Anakin out there, and then you go after Anakin, and then you try to kill him. And then she gets the message, and she's like, oh, now I have to go after Luke. Why are you going after Luke? Because Luke's important to Obi-Wan? That's not going to draw out Anakin. Is she after Obi-Wan, or is she after Anakin? And I feel like the series lost sight of that. Because suddenly it seems like she's going after Luke to hurt Obi-Wan. Where maybe, like, she's pissed because Obi-Wan let it happen, but throughout the rest of the series, she was after Anakin. So it feels like a course change. This is not a plot hole, I want to specify. This does not collapse the logic of the series, and I like what they do with her character through this story, but I feel like it's very contrived. Maybe give her a bit more rage, so like she's pissed at Obi-Wan, and she's like, fuck it. I'm just going after Obi-Wan. He let this shit happen. If I can't get my revenge against Anakin, I'm going to get my revenge against Obi-Wan. Maybe do something like that. But they never really do that. That's a funkiness. I feel like going back to Thor Skywalker's video here, he is really stretching out a lot of this stuff. You keep on hearing him say the word unlikely. This is unlikely. This is unlikely. And then he calls it a plot hole. Being unlikely and being a plot hole are two completely different things. Something that is unlikely is not a plot hole because it's unlikely, meaning it's possible. A plot hole means it's impossible, but it still happens. But he's really nitpicking, and as you saw, as he went through and did his nitpicks, I'm like, well, actually, there's a logic there. I could see that. It's flimsy, and I again get the sense he's going into this looking to hate it. He's going into it with the intent to hate it. This is a problem. The prequels came out, and everybody nitpicked him to death, and hey, I'll go ahead and say it. Red Letter Media and their analysis of the prequels is absolutely hilarious. It is. Do they go over the top? Absolutely. But it's hilarious. But ever since then, why did I say it twice? they go over a new piece of Star Wars media comes out, and boy, oh boy, we gotta overanalyze the shit out of this again. They did it with The Force Awakens. They did it with Last Jedi. They did it with Rise of Skywalker. God, they really do it with The Last Jedi over and over again, which is weird because Rise of Skywalker is so much worse than Last Jedi. Not even close. But man, it seems like they've let Rise of Skywalker kind of go and then just keep on going after Last Jedi. I don't understand that logic at all. That one might be partially encouraged by the racist and the sexist with killing Marie Tran and Holdo and characters like that. But maybe the only thing that's really been kind of not as hit by this would be The Mandalorian. And the animated series, I feel the animated series are less popular, and I feel like The Mandalorian deals enough with the outside edges of canon that people aren't as attached to it. But anything that goes into canon, like the sequel trilogy, or this Obi-Wan Kenobi series, or Boba Fett, people are getting up in arms about. And it's so over the top. And yes, if you go into literally anything, hoping to hate it, you're gonna hate it. That's a problem. You shouldn't go into anything hoping to hate it. You should go into all honestly, frankly, you should go into all movies, all TV series with an open mind. This is stuff that people put a lot of work into. Even if it's a corporate thing, there are people at the lower levels put a lot of work into it. Go into it with an open mind. Let it succeed or fail on its own merits. Don't go into it hating it. Because you just saw Thor Skywalker spend 13 minutes going over stuff that was unlikely, but hardly not impossible. And a lot of it actually makes sense if you really want to break it down. And he scripted that. Off the top of my head, I'm coming up with logical counters to his scripted video there. What's up with that? Yeah. Listen, there's lots of racist and sexist that are going after Obi-Wan Kenobi as well. Thor Skywalker definitely doesn't seem to be one of those. I would not want to put him with that group. You are welcome to criticize the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. If there are so many issues with it that you couldn't enjoy it, go for it. But yeah, that wasn't it.
They think order and chaos are somehow opposites and try to control what won't be.
I used to fuck guys like you in prison.